Hey friends and followers, I'm Ro, your friendly neighborhood developer. For today, I thought it'd be interesting to explore the default SPA templates that ship with ASP.NET Core 5.0. Now, although we will be unpacking the Angular and React project templates in this video, the learnings from this can be applied to other project types too. As a web developer today, we're quite fortunate to have a host of different utilities at our disposal that help us create and bootstrap our projects. So Angular developers, we've got Angular CLI, we've got Create React App for React projects, and .NET of course has .NET New. These utilities produce robust, ready-to-run projects that make it easy for us to get started with a working set of code. I think what makes the .NET SPA templates interesting is how it leverages the UI scaffolding tools together with your .NET projects to essentially create two separate yet connected projects. So that's your UI project running either Angular or React as your front end and your .NET project for your API backend. Now, while these SPA templates make it easy to get started, they also tend to obfuscate how these two project types work with each other. The aim of this video is to arm you with the knowledge you need to change and customize it to suit your needs. This should be particularly helpful when it comes time to setting up your build and your deploy pipelines. Now, before we get into it, I've made some assumptions. One, that you have a general understanding of how ASP.NET works. So you know what code to expect in a program.cs or startup.cs file. Secondly, that you also have some familiarity with either Angular or React. Okay, so let's get started. Let's kick things off by creating two projects side by side. We'll start with the Angular project by searching for a template called ASP.NET Core with Angular. After choosing the template, let's name our app my.angular.app and choose .NET 5 as the target framework. Now this project creation and scaffolding could take some time, so let's create the React project too. For the React project, we'll use ASP.NET Core with React.js as our template. And similar to the previous project, let's call this my.react.app. I'll choose .NET 5 as the target framework here too. The reason we are creating both projects is to give us the opportunity to compare the templates side by side. We'll look at the similarities in the project structure, but also see how the .NET toolset works with the Angular and React utilities. Now let's build both the projects. A word of caution here though, the first time you build your application, it may take a while. I'm talking minutes here. The reason for this is that during the first build, not only do your .NET NuGet dependencies need to be resolved, but also the NPM dependencies for the UI project. So let's wait for both the projects to build and then we'll try run them both. The application functionality that both these project templates generate are identical. We'll start with the Angular project. As you can see here, it has three nav pages or routes, namely home, counter, and fetch data. We'll run the React application too and should see identical functionality with the same three routes that we saw earlier. The home route presents some static HTML. The counter presents values maintained in the application state on the user interface. And the fetch data route gets JSON data from our .NET controller. Now, let's have a look at the project structure, which at first glance should look familiar to .NET developers. The only thing that stands out here is that there is an additional folder called Client App, which contains the code for your UI projects. We'll have a look at that in just a bit. For now though, let's start off with the .NET project dependencies. Here, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.sparservices.extension, or we'll call it spar services. That's the only NuGet dependencies that seems to be added. This dependency will become clear as we look at the startup code, so let's do that now. Initially, even the startup code looks familiar, but three key things stand out. Firstly, within configure, we are calling an extension method called useSparStaticFiles. This relates to the add_SparStaticFiles extension method that we call here in configure services. Now, both of these extension methods are derived from the spar services NuGet package that we've added earlier. Let's look at the add_SparStaticFiles code. This here ensures that in production, your Angular or React files will be served from the directory specified here. For Angular, this points to the dist or distribution folder within your client app directory, whereas in the React project, it serves a folder called build within client app. Now, if you are an Angular or React developer, the names of these folders should start making sense. That's because the folder names correspond to folders containing the build output during an npm run build. Another thing you notice is that configure also calls the useSpar extension method. Now, during development, this allows us to serve the client project by invoking the relevant npm command. This is done so by calling either the useAngularCLI server or use React development server extension methods on the web host environment. What this means for you is that when you run your app locally, .NET will, in your stead, run the npm start command. You can now continue editing your UI project, let's say within Visual Studio Code, and still expect features like hot reloading to work. Now, let's spend a minute looking at the UI client application. As mentioned earlier, the UI application, both for Angular and for React, reside within the client app directory. Let's explore the package.json files and see what we notice there. We'll start with the Angular app. Here, the dependencies and the script section look identical to a default app created via Angular CLI. For React, the application setup seems to be identical to what you'd expect when invoking create React app. The only additions that you see here are the three UI components that are created to serve up the home, the counter, and the fetch data routes. Now, since all of this looks so familiar, you might be wondering, how does the .NET ecosystem evoke the necessary scripts when building and publishing? Well, all the magic is hidden within the .NET project files, so let's have a look at that, shall we? Here, let's start off with the Angular project file. This first property group defines a few key things, namely the root folder for the Spar project, which in our case is called client app. Secondly, a directive to exclude the node modules folder. This is both from showing up within Visual Studio and prevent it from being published. And lastly, and this is only for the Angular project, there's also an option to enable server-side pre-rendering. Now, at the time of creating this video, server-side pre-rendering is not a supported feature of the React template, but that might change in the future. The next thing we notice is the item group. This item group ensures that we do not publish the Spar source files, but we do show them on the project files listed within Visual Studio. In addition, we also prevent the node modules folder and its contents from showing up within Visual Studio. This next target section instructs .NET to complete certain activities before running a .NET build. As you can see here, it also has some additional conditions attached to it. So this section only runs when the configuration is debugged and the node modules folder does not exist. So this would have run the first time we created the project and ran it from within Visual Studio earlier in this video. Within this section, the project template ensures a couple of things. A, that we have Node.js installed. If it isn't, we'll get an error message. And B, it also runs the npm install command, which should install all the necessary dependencies of our UI project before building our .NET project and its dependencies. And finally, this last target section ensures that your project, so that's both your UI project running either Angular or React, as well as your .NET project, is correctly published. Now, when you do set up your build and your deploy pipelines, this section is what you're most likely to change to suit your needs. As you can see here, there are a couple of things happening. Firstly, we run an npm install to get all the UI dependencies sorted. Next, we also run an npm build in production mode. The third thing we notice, and again this is only for the Angular template as it has server-side rendering, so you will not see this in the React project. Here we run an npm build for server-side rendering specifically. Steps 2 and 3 produce all the distribution files that we will need to be hosted on our web server. So in this next section, we mark those files as valid distribution files. So for your Angular project, it's the contents of your dist directory. For React, it's the contents in a directory called build. Number 5, again, this is only for server-side rendering. We might also copy over the node modules directory, so this won't appear in your React project. And lastly, by adding the build spar files to our resolved file to publish, we tell .NET to include them for publishing. So that's it. This configuration in the .NET project file, together with the code that we saw earlier in your startup.cs, it ensures that both your SPA and your API projects work seamlessly, whether you're developing locally or you're publishing it to your Azure App Service. Hopefully, this helps you get started with your journey with .NET and your SPA projects. As always, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.